Today on Locked On Canadiens, it is a special weekend bonus episode. It is a crossover between Locked On Canadiens and Locked On Senators, and you will hear a conversation about the Canadiens' offseason moves and the rebuild so far, and then about the Senators, how they're doing their offseason moves and where they're expected to land. And finally, we went a little bit more in depth in terms of where, which players to look out for, sleeper picks, where the teams are going to rank at the end of the season, all of that. And that's coming up on Locked On Canadiens.
Your Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Atlantic Division Preview. I'm Ross Levitan alongside Brandon Pillar, and today we are joined by the wonderful Laura Saba of Locked On Canadiens. You can follow her on Twitter at The Active Stick. I know her favorite thing to discuss is the Senators Montreal Canadiens rivalry. Laura, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you guys for having me. This is such a great and fun idea. I'm excited to see all the other episodes as well.
Yeah, it's we're doing a whole Atlantic Division crossover, and we definitely were excited for the one against the Habs because, like Ross mentioned, it's definitely one of the juicier rivalries we've got this season. And anytime these two teams play, it's must-watch television for fans of either side.
And wherever they are in the standings, right?
Exactly.
Like Ottawa had been rebuilding the last 4 years, and they still had competitive games. And now Montreal seems to be stepping into that phase, but that didn't take any of the fireworks out from the end of last season. Laura, where are you at right now with the Montreal Canadiens as they head into the 2022-23 season?
It's really strange to say that I'm extremely optimistic when I know that the team is not going to be good. I know we're going to focus a little bit on the end results later in the show, but it feels like in Montreal with the new management, after years of frustration, or near misses or things like that, it finally seems like there's a management group and a front office staff and coaching staff that are poised to take the team to the next level in the next few years. I know that the results probably won't be, where you would expect for a contending team, but the Canadiens are at the beginning of a rebuild. People are talking about it being year 2 of the rebuild, and I'm like, no, that's year 1 of the rebuild, right? The coaching change happened mid-season. The management change happened mid-season. So we're kind of within year 1 of the rebuild. And I think for me, as a Canadiens fan, I feel good about the direction they're going in. And what I'm looking for this season isn't necessarily what the results of the games themselves are. But if I see the young players, the people who are expected to make the team or people who are expected to be the team in the future, if they're taking strides forward in their development, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the way they play and how they improve. And so, it feels like optimism right now. And Kent Hughes has made some really bold moves, has done some great trades. So you feel confident with this front office staff. There have been question marks for sure, but I think right now the Canadiens have the luxury of time and money to be patient and take some time to work really hard on developing. And I think the fans will give them that luxury. Whereas before, I don't think that a rebuild, an open outright rebuild, would have been a good sell for the fans, or an easy sell to the fans.
And not only that, but they're bringing in player development staff that are just enormous names. Marie-Philippe Poulin, Vincent Lecavalier. You mentioned the new head coach, Martin St. Louis. These are well-respected names in hockey circles. And then they add Jeff Gordon to the management team. Kent Hughes, as you mentioned. Pilsy, I didn't realize this. Dominic Ducharme won 8 games out of 45 last season.
That's impressive, honestly. Like, that is, wow. And especially coming off going to the Stanley Cup final and then having that happen. We thought making the conference final game 7 and then the crash
then
was
imploding.
Something. That was a roller coaster of a ride you just went on, Laura.
Yeah, it was interesting because I think for the Canadiens to make the Stanley Cup final, I think they played really well, and that gets discounted a lot. Yes, there were a lot of factors that helped them out. I'm not going to discount any of them. Like you can count on a Leafs implosion, and I'm not going to discount that. But I also want to mention that, against the Jets, against the Golden Knights, the Canadiens played really well. Like every
Yep.
single player attain their potential in that moment, and all of the luck factors kind of helped out. And then, implosion against the Tampa Bay Lightning, I think that was to be expected. We did find out later that Shea Weber and Carey Price were playing through,
Yeah.
serious injuries. They never really came back from that. But I don't think anybody expected the season to start out with, 8 wins in 45 games. I don't think people expected them to be that bad. I don't think people expected Cole Caulfield to regress. So yes, you're right. It was an emotional roller coaster, and then with the Martin St. Louis improvements and
Yep.
Cole Caulfield finding his game, and I think people are looking forward to a couple of years of stability. If it takes a few years to go back into playoff contention and hopefully be a Stanley Cup contending team, I think people are going to be okay if they can see sort of a steady increase as opposed to all over the place. And it wasn't just Bergevin, it wasn't just Ducharme. Like the Bergevin years had a lot of that,
Yeah.
right? Like they'd make a conference final and then they'd miss the playoffs for 3 years. So like there's a lot of that going on. So I feel like just like a steady sort of clear goal, a clear path, and slow improvement and tangible improvement, I think, is what we're looking for. Like I don't think anybody wants any of that emotional, you called it a roller coaster. I just think it's like it's frustrations, it's those highs and lows, the frustration aspect. I don't think
Yep.
anyone wants that.
At what point did you know the season was off the rails? Because you had to have high expectations after making it to the Stanley Cup final, but then they scored 4 goals in the first 5 games, all 5 regulation losses. Was that the alarm bell when you didn't have the Webers and the Price in the world? Or was there still that hope that, hey, we've got a little bit of a long playoff run hangover and things will be all right?
I will say that I had a little bit more patience than those first 5 games. And I think for me, it was about probably game 10, because that's around the time that you expect all the rust to be shaken off.
Yeah.
That's around the time you expect leaders to emerge to replace the ones that were lost. That's about the time that you would expect a coach to make adjustments. So 10 to 12 games in, I think that's a good, I look at the first month, the 10 to 12 games. If October, they couldn't get it back, then it's not that I started to worry, it's that I was resigned to the fact that the team was not going in a good direction.
Yeah, and Laura, you mentioned earlier how you're starting the rebuild here, and I feel like it sounds funny, like you said, say you're optimistic, but Sens fans can kind of relate to that. It is kind of comforting knowing, like, okay, we are in a rebuild. We can't get any lower than this. There's only up from here, and now you can get excited about prospects. You don't have to worry so much about wins and losses. It's more about the improvements. And what a way to kick off a rebuild, drafting first overall in Montreal. Like, nonetheless, it was just a epic way to kind of kickstart that. However, a lot of people, myself included, were surprised with the Habs going with Juraj Slafkovsky first overall. Now that the dust has settled a little bit and we've had time to digest it, how do you feel about that decision?
I understand it a lot more after watching the Canadiens behind the scenes draft video. And, obviously it was only 10 minutes and it was taken out of hours of interviews and conversations. But the way that they talked about it, they allowed a little bit of a glimpse as to what their thinking was when they chose him. So I understand that a lot more. And I do think that one thing that we've kind of had to accept as fans is that Slafkovsky is a lot more raw than Shane Wright. Shane Wright was a much more complete, well-rounded player, closer to being ready to the NHL, to make the NHL. I think with Slafkovsky, as much as he has a high ceiling and as much as he plays well in big games and big moments, when you watch him, you can see the pockets of potential in the plays that he makes, in the way that he carries himself. But you can also tell that there needs to be more game action, more NHL experience, even more AHL experience. So I'm excited about the extremely high ceiling for this player. I am a little bit apprehensive because I know that for him to attain that potential, the Canadiens need to develop him right. And for all their talk, we haven't yet seen the action. We've seen the hirings, we've seen their conversation, we've seen the way that they talk about how they care about development now, how they're going to invest in it, and who more to invest in than your first overall pick. But I want to see it in action. So like, to me, it's up to the Canadiens. The player himself seems ready to become a star. He wants to be a star. He wants to be a big part of Montreal. He wants to be a big part of bringing success back to Montreal. And I sense that the way he works, he's going to do what it takes. So it's up to the Canadiens to really lead him correctly, to support him well, not to rush him. And so for me, I was having conversations on draft night. I was shocked. And Pilsy, you remember that. I was so shocked. I completely forgot about the DeBrincat trade that day.
Yeah.
Like that, I was just like, thank you for not calling me on that, by the way,
All good.
in the recording. But, I was having conversations with people and they're saying like, this guy could be a total bust, or he could be like the next Jaromir Jagr. And I'm like, if he gets like 1/4 of the way to a Jaromir Jagr, how great is that?
Yeah, it would be fantastic. Now, I just went all the way back to find the last first overall picked forward who didn't play in the NHL immediately following his selection. Matt Sundin in 1989. There's been a few defensemen along the way. Owen Power, Eric Johnson, both stand out in terms of that. But is there pressure for Slafkovsky to play the whole year in Montreal? You mentioned Laval as an option where they wouldn't even burn a year off his contract. Is that more than likely in your opinion? Or will he at least get the 9 games and then reassess?
I think there will be an assessment period because I do think that the Canadiens expect him to make the team at some point this season, but not necessarily full time. And it's entirely possible, opening night at home for the first time in almost a decade, I think a decade against the Leafs. It's entirely possible that somebody like him and guys like Caden Gooley would be in the opening night roster. And then, after a few games, they might get sent down to really spend some time, because you got to think about it. Like, he has to get top line minutes and he has to play against really physical competition, and the AHL is great for that. So I don't think that he'll spend the entire year in the AHL, but I do expect personally, and I might be wrong, but I do expect personally that he will spend time in Laval first at the beginning of the season. If not the first game, at the beginning of the season, maybe a week or two in, even maybe after that first game. I don't know.
So this is something definitely to monitor, and I kind of look at it in similar stature players, different skill set, but Mikko Rantanen, when he came over, got 9 games, but then just learned how to dominate the North American game, was over a point per game in the AHL, and then scored 20 in the NHL next year. So I'm curious if that would be a good development path to look at when Juraj Slafkovsky's on his way up, because the physical tools are there. What's he at? 6'5", 240 basically. Huge. Right now?
Essentially, yeah. He's even getting used to skating at that weight. Like, he put on a lot of pounds this season, and it's all like, it's bulk. It's not, it's him working hard, and he's obviously he's 18. He's pretty young. He just got his braces off a couple of months before the draft. So like, he's a kid that's growing into men. So there's a little bit of growth there. And he's learning to kind of use that body and that space a little bit. But every time he does something that shows why Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton fell in love with this kid, like, I think to myself that, the Canadiens better not screw this up, because it could be something really good.
It really could. And the irony that they take a man that enormous at first overall and then take Lane Hudson, my favorite prospect from the draft, in the second round. He was the best. He was the best. After we did our profile on him, his dad DM'd me being like, thanks for the nice words. His growth plates are very underdeveloped. He will be great. And I believe it. That guy is such a stud the way he skates. And then Owen Beck was a favorite as well. So really, to me, the Habs 2022 draft was similar to Ottawa's 2020 draft, where you get all these assets in, and now that's when the excitement of a rebuild starts. You said this feels like year one. It's the same, right? Because the first year, when the wheels actually fall off for Ottawa, it was 2017-18. You don't even have any prospects where you're like, oh, everything's going to be okay. Like, they're coming. They didn't even exist. It's just everything sucks. Andrew Sturtz was like a prospect to watch. I think Ottawa traded him to Montreal for like, anyways, doesn't even matter. A player who might never have even been named. I have one final question for you with Montreal. We're going to touch on a little bit more later when it comes to a sleeper pick. But we saw the great chemistry between Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield. Who do you expect to start the season with those two on the top line?
So they've got a lot of options. Some of us would like to see SE alone in there because he's got a lot of skill. I think what they're going to do, to be honest, if Josh Anderson is healthy, is put him back there at the beginning. I know that a lot of people just want a top line that's, Nick Suzuki, Cole Caulfield, Slafkovsky, but you got to think about people, playing on their right sides. You got to think about, who can read the play and all of that. So I do feel like they're going to start with Josh Anderson and they're going to give somebody from the prospect pool a look at some point. And it's entirely possible that Josh Anderson gets traded. He's a big guy. People love that. He's a power forward. People love that. He's very handsome. I love that. But I think that's who they start if he's healthy. And then if he's not, I truly have no idea because they have so many options and they want to make sure that they preserve the chemistry between those two, but also have them sort of bring along some development as well, just by, sheer playing with Nick Suzuki.
Pilsy, Andrew Sturts, and a 5th-round pick were traded from Ottawa to Montreal in exchange for?
I don't know. I have no clue.
Your considerations.
Mike Riley.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That was a trade we actually ended up really liking.
All right, stick around if you want to learn some more. This is a crossover edition of Locked On Canadiens, Locked On Senators. I'll be right back. I got to wash my mouth out, and then we'll talk some Ottawa Senators hockey afterwards with Laura Saba and Brandon Pillar. I'm Ross Levitan. Stick around. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, you're listening to a crossover edition in the Atlantic Division. I'm Ross Levitan alongside Brandon Pillar, and joining us, Laura Saba from Locked On Canadiens. You can go follow the show on Twitter, LO_Canadiens. You can follow Laura on Twitter at The Active Stick, and we are at Sens Central. Although I feel we might have some of your listeners blocked, Laura. If I see a Habs logo and they're giving it to me, I said, I don't know if you're going to provide any very nice words for us ever. So I just like to cut the umbilical cord right there. That to say, it's always fun when these two teams get together. And what are you expecting this year? I'm a little upset because Ottawa and Montreal, I don't need it to be the home opener or early in the season, but I think we have to wait till late November for the first matchup.
Absolutely. I just want to say, though, it's pretty mutual. Don't worry. I'm not taking it personal. If you block any Habs fans, there's plenty of Sens fans in my delete and block list. And the reason is because these games get really contentious, right? I am also... It's one of those things where every time they play, you're mostly hoping that all of the players get out unhurt. Like that to me is
especially in the rookie games. Like, because Habs fans said it was a thing that the Sens guys were injuring there, and then we lost 3 guys in that game this year.
I believe it was all to one player, right?
Yeah, more or less, which sucks because he would be my favorite player if he played for the Sens. We got one coming. Don't worry, he's still at North Dakota. You guys will meet Tyler Clevin next year. But yeah, it is. You got to admit, though, Brendan Gallagher's a psychopath. Did you hear his answer, what he said about his grandparents the other day?
I did not hear that. Are you about to give me news about the Canadiens?
Core memories from when he was a kid, and he's like, I used to go to my grandpa and kick him in the nuts all the time. And everyone else had these cute stories. And he just went, I was like, if that was my teammate, I'd tell him to smarten up. They're role models. There's kids watching. But no, it's always good for the headlines for sure when these two teams get together. Yeah. So what would you think if you're asking us as someone who's followed this team but from the periphery? What do you want to know about the Ottawa Senators?
A lot, actually. I do. I really, I think the first question that I have is, how do you feel about what changes they've made in goal? Let's start from there and then branch out.
Okay.
How do you feel about the new, I guess, removing Matt Murray from the equation? And I believe, are they hanging their hopes on Cam Talbot? I don't know.
Not in my opinion, Pilsy.
Yeah, not at all. I think people outside Sens fandom and the NHL circles don't really respect Anton Forsberg enough for where we hold him. He really came in and saved the day in multiple occasions last season. Matt Murray was supposed to be the guy. They paid him. He was one of the highest paid goaltenders in the league. And unfortunately, He had a lot of health issues, injuries, illnesses, all these kinds of things, and he was hardly ever available. And that's why the Senators picked up Forsberg on waivers. And now, in our opinion, he's still the 1A guy. Like, Cam Talbot is trying to take his job, in our opinion, because he proved he can be a starter. He put up incredible numbers behind a terrible, terrible Ottawa Senators defense. So for us, having two solid goalies is such a relief, because last year was basically like, let's give Anton Forsberg as many starts, and then when he gets tired, I guess we'll turn it to Gustafsson or Murray. And the coaches, the fans, and probably even the players, you could tell they were not confident in those goalies. So Anton Forsberg is an incredible place to start. Adding another veteran like Cam Talbot, the Sens fans, kind of the circles and opinions are that we have a really solid goaltending tandem here.
Yeah, what I like about Anton Forsberg too, and you mentioned the solid numbers he put up, a .917 save percentage, but in 46 games on this Ottawa Senators team last year, he had 22 wins and 17 losses. So batting pretty high above 500 for a guy who wasn't really expected to be much of anything. I believe he was put on waivers 3 times the year that they got him. From Carolina to Edmonton to Winnipeg to Ottawa. And this is all during COVID. This guy's got a young family, 2 kids, and now he's become a fan favorite. He actually marched in the Pride Parade in August, so really kind of getting himself into the community. And Ottawa's kind of had experiences like this before when it comes to Craig Anderson, who was acquired as a journeyman 30-year-old who really couldn't get his bearings in one location. So we're hoping. It's still early. He signed to a 3-year extension at 2.75. So it's not like you're investing a whole lot of capital in him. But for what he's put up the last season and a bit since he's come to town, he's been available, which you can't say for the other goalies in the organization, and he's put up some good numbers. So I understand, especially from your perspective, being like, oh, Cam Talbot, 35 years old, was an all-star last year with Minnesota, won 12 of his last 13 games down the stretch in the regular season. But I think it's going to be a pretty healthy competition, 1A, 1B. I don't think either of them plays more than 55 games, though. I think it's going to be pretty even at the end of the day.
I want to next ask, first of all, can I have Thomas Chabot
No.
for the Habs?
No, absolutely not.
All right.
No merci.
But let's talk about the defense a little bit.
Yeah.
If general consensus is that the Ottawa Senators have made amazing improvements in the offseason. I think, like, personally, in my mind, they were the most improved team. They made the best moves, and DeBrincat was obviously a steal at what they got for him. And you get a little lucky with Chicago there. I feel like Kirby Dach as well was kind of like a luck thing. Obviously, DeBrincat is elite. He's amazing. Like, I love watching him play, and I'm very, very jealous. But I want to, let's talk a little bit about the defense, because we talked about how Ottawa has made the biggest strides, the best improvements, the most improvements, all of that, all of the superlatives there. But I want to know, what did they do to help their defense? Because that's the question mark. If you ask me, and again, I'm an observer from the outside, that's the question mark everywhere you go. It's not even goaltending. It's not a question mark in goal. It's if they get competent goaltending, everything will be okay. But for me, the defense is like,
it's a question. There's no doubt that it is a huge question mark. But if you had asked us in mid-June, what are you most excited about for next season? And yeah, I guess that's kind of unfair because that's before all the moves. But Jake Sanderson, his arrival to the NHL, like, there is so much hype and excitement about him in Ottawa. And what a tease too. Like, he was playing so well at North Dakota. He was named a first-team All-Star, and he missed half the year, suffered a brutal injury at the mid part of the season. He was like diving across the crease to try to save a goal, and a skate cut his hand wide open. Then he got back just in time. Or no, it was the other way around. He got hurt at the Olympics, came back in time, got hurt in the first game, still at a point, and then came back in his first game back, got hurt again. So it was such like start, stop season. And then he came to Ottawa and was pushing so hard to get into a couple of games at the end of the year, re-injured himself, and ended up missing. I think he was wearing a cast for like 8 weeks, it felt. So we're like, okay, like, that sucks. However, looked good at the rookie tournament. Only played 1 game though. Looked real good against Toronto in the preseason opener. Had some great defensive plays against Marner and Nylander. So not the depth guys, the guys you want to see him defending well against. And a lot of their potential success hinges on a 20-year-old, and that is not lost on me how stressful that is. They seem like they're in on every guy. Like they were in on Mackenzie Weegar, they were in on John Marino. The laundry list continues, but the one that's left is Jacob Chychrun, who obviously has ties to the Ottawa area. His family has a cottage in Arnprior and always has in the Ottawa Valley. So I don't really know if there's a fit. It almost seems forced because he's another left shot guy, and the contract looks great, but what are you going to have to give up for him? Talking about handsome guys, Shane Pinto isn't going anywhere anytime soon, hopefully. But yeah, when you look at the decor with Ottawa, like you're betting on at least one of Hamonic and Holden being able to handle like a top 4, top 5 role with defensive responsibility. So that could be scary. Yeah, I could understand Sens fans being a little nervous about that.
I mean, honestly, the other day I got asked if there were any Norris candidates on the Canadiens, and I was like, I don't even know if there's like that many NHL defenseman candidates on the Canadiens. I don't want to get yelled at by our fans. There's a lot of potential in the pipeline. I'm not discounting that, and I think Matheson seems to be a really great pickup for the Habs. But all I'm saying is I understand what you mean when you say like your hopes are hanging on your top pairing, and then like some guys can sort of support them. And so I did want to ask a couple more questions about the current roster. I guess like this was something that a lot of people in Ottawa wanted, predicted, and it did seem like a foregone conclusion. But Claude Giroux coming home was a big one, and so I want to ask you guys, what's your assessment of
There he is.
And that day where like he showed up to sign and meet the media and brought his kid, like just I've actually been following his wife on Instagram for the longest time. Nice. And like all of this stuff where like she I think she ordered food from somewhere, and like they had like welcome home Giroux or something like that. Like sure. It's just like it's such a heartwarming story.
Behind the scenes, she I think had quite a bit to do with him coming to Ottawa.
Right. That's she's from the area, right?
She's born and raised in Ottawa, and Claude moved here, I believe, when he was 10 or 11 from Hearst, right? up north. Yeah. Well, he played in Cumberland. He played minor hockey here, and then didn't get drafted to the OHL. So then he applied to the Quebec League, and then I think he put up back-to-back 100-point years. I mean, the rest is history about his career. But yeah, my first tweet having a lust for him was in 2018. So this has been a long time coming, Pillsy. I'll hand it off to you with that.
Yeah, and he was just the perfect guy. Like Pierre Dorion even talked about it years ago. I think 2018, him and Eugene Melnyk. Yeah, they had a massive meeting in the Caribbean, and they talked about how are we going to rebuild this team? How's this going to work? And the one guy they focused on is in the summer of 2022, Claude Giroux is going to be a free agent. That's the guy we're going to go for.
And it was written.
And this is a guy they've targeted. And there's not a single other guy I can think of that makes more sense to come to Ottawa at this time, because they needed a veteran guy for their top 6. They needed someone that wanted to be in Ottawa. And like Ross mentioned, the family ties are a big part of that. And third, give me a third finger, Ross. There we go. Third, they needed someone that can help out these young centermen with their face-offs. And Claude Giroux has had incredible face-off success. And it's so hilarious. We're such loser fans, but Ross and I are so excited about watching a 5-second video of Claude Giroux teaching Tim Stützle how to take a face-off. We're like, that's what we wanted. That's what we needed. And because
can I get this on print?
Yeah, exactly. Because the Ottawa Senators, their center depth right now is very young. You look at Josh Norris, Tim Stützle, Shane Pinto, and possibly even down to the fourth line, Mark Kastelic. So all these guys are very limited experience. Yeah, Ridley Gregg could be in there as well. So all these guys, limited face-off experience. To have a guy every practice, every day, spend 20 minutes with you, showing you the tips and tricks that he's acquired over a long career is just, the value is immense there. So Claude Giroux coming on a 3-year deal, reasonably priced. The Sens have cap space for him. The stars just aligned. So we were all so ecstatic that the Senators finally, free agency, didn't get beat out by every other team in the entire league.
Yeah, that's their
Claude chose to come home.
That's their biggest free agent signing of all time. There's no question about that. Second would probably be Alex Kovalev or Sergei Gonchar. And those guys were like 37 and 38, not 34, and still coming off a real good season. And again, Pilsy said at the stars align, like Florida just couldn't offer him any money. I think their final offer to him was 1-by-1. Like, hey, if you want to come back, like we'd love to have you, but we literally can't pay you anything. So instead, he takes the 650% raise and comes to Ottawa at 6.5 over the next 3 years, which I think is reasonable. So Leaf fans were quick to be like, oh, Patrick Marleau. Well, Patrick Marleau, when he signed that 3-year deal, they ended up having to trade a first-round pick to get out of it. He was 37 when he signed the deal, not when it was finishing. So I think at this age, it's perfect. If it was a year or two from now, then you're getting into that, is it worth it? But at 34 and playing with the guys he is, it's going to start as a line of Stützle, DeBrincat, and Giroux. Call it the first line, call it the second line, whatever. But it's going to be fun. Like you mentioned, the defense, real question mark. This team's going to be a high-scoring team, and they're going to be fun to watch for sure.
So I have a couple more questions with regard to Claude Giroux specifically. Is how much production do you think he can put up? Like I think the intangibles are immeasurable, right? Obviously, intangibles are by definition immeasurable, but I think all of that, the influence that he's going to have, the veteran presence, that bringing the young guys along. What do you think his production is going to look like, particularly since? So we know that that's the line he's going to play on? That's what he's So obviously that's going to help a lot. What do you expect from him?
My hot take going into this season, and I'm sure I'll be repeating it on some previews with Locked On NHL, I say he hits 1,000 points this year. And that is an enormous season. That would be a 77-point season. I say he's going to do that right at the end. Yeah, is it high? For sure. This is also a guy, though, who had 18 points in his last 12 regular season games with the Florida Panthers. This guy still produces at a real high level. And I think that the energy he's going to get from playing in front of friends and family for 41 games this year, having his kids at the rink, and being able to help Tim Stützle take the next step in the third year of his career, I think this is going to be a rejuvenating year for Claude Giroux. So I understand I'm high on it. I think he had 66 points last year, so I'm giving him a bit of a boost. But realistically, and we'll get to some BetOnline totals about the regular season point totals for the teams, but they just put out their player props as well at betonline.ag, and they've got Claude Giroux at 54.5. And I think he goes slightly on the over, but anywhere 50 and up, I'd say is a successful year. No, Pills?
Absolutely, yeah. And honestly, it's the value he brings with the face-off, because there's 5 other guys in this top 6 now that can produce points. There's not 5 other guys that can win face-offs and have the veteran experience that Claude Giroux has.
And something else interesting, Laura, is that they've decided, and this just came out about a day before we're recording here on Thursday, September 29th. I know this is going to come out October 9th, right before the season. We're going to get the hype going. But they're rolling with the exact same first power play unit as last year. So that means no DeBrincat and no Giroux on the top power play unit. They're rolling with Chabot, Batherson, Norris, Stützle, and Brady's obviously the net front guy. That unit was so good last year. They're like, okay, we've got these 2 kids coming in that we have high hopes for in Shane Pinto and Jake Sanderson. So Sanderson and Pinto are going to be on the second unit with Claude Giroux and Alex DeBrincat. So I don't even know if you can call it a second unit. DJ Smith keeps referencing the St. Louis Blues, who split up the talent on their 2, and they were second in the league last year. So that's something to watch this season as well, is how do you have a 2-time 40-goal scorer, 24 years old, not on your top unit? It'll be interesting to see how the players respond to that.
I think it's actually, you know what? I think that's great. Imagine having such an embarrassment of riches that you can put your top talent, or, elements of your top talent on your second wave. I just have one more question, because I know, we're running out of time a little bit, is that you mentioned, the top 6 players. Like, there's a lot of fun top 6 players. Like, what do you do if that top 2 punch gets a little bit too crowded? I mean, I feel like sometimes skill players are very much wasted on the bottom 2 lines. Like, I feel like there's such a thing as a good bottom 6, and a good bottom 6 player. Like, for me, the epitome of that is Jake Evans on the Montreal Canadiens. Like, he's not going to be a top line player. He's not going to be a top 6 player. But as a bottom 6 player, he performs amazingly. So, like, what happens now when you're getting closer to trying to contend? Do you think some of that forward talent gets traded away for defensive help? What are your thoughts on that?
I think the Ottawa Senators are in a position where they're very fortunate that this offseason they picked up 2 great players in DeBrincat and Claude Giroux, and then throw Cam Talbot in there as well, without letting too many detrimental pieces go the other way. And they still have a stocked pipeline of prospects that they might be able to keep all these guys at least for a while until they kind of outprice themselves, as good teams tend to do, like the Tampa Bay Lightning. Eventually, guys just upgrade and outprice themselves. But
But Pilsy, they're all locked in.
yeah, but that's what I'm saying. The core guys are going to be there,
Right.
but the bottom 6 guys that want to bump up to the core and eventually get priced out, that's going to happen. But the Ottawa Senators, they can keep those guys at that level while using prospects and draft picks now to acquire help on the back end like they need. Like that's the beauty of it, is they're still in that sweet spot where they haven't exhausted all their future assets in trade deadline rentals, because this is their first year where that would even be an option. So they still have ways to keep everyone in their spots slotted in this NHL roster while upgrading in other areas of weakness using prospects and picks.
And I think finally, not only does the addition of the top end talent help the top 6, but now, and Alex Formenton, of course, it's still clouded with the Hockey Canada investigation. He hasn't been named, but of course, there's the thought he was on that World Junior team, but he also doesn't have a contract. So how is that going to go? They pick up Tyler Mott to come in as a restricted or as an unrestricted free agent. They get him, and now all of a sudden that third line, and Shane Pinto, of course, has to stay healthy. Only played 5 games last year before a shoulder surgery wiped out the rest of his year. Like, the depth is looking good. Montreal native Mathieu Joseph was unbelievable when he came over. He's first.
We do like him.
He's good, eh? Second in franchise history in points per game. Sample size be damned. Right behind Danny Heatley, most points per game in Sens history. But no, all jokes aside, I think the depth is going to be kind of intriguing part of this as well. But you're right. At some point, you do have to decide who's on the outside looking in of the core and how can we address an area of weakness because of that. I just gave you a couple guys who I think could be X factors for the Sens. We'll get Pilsy's take on those as well. And who on the Montreal Canadiens could you get on your fantasy team and still expect production, even though they're the reigning first ever 32nd place team in the National Hockey? They had to get that shot in. We'll have more of this Locked On crossover with Laura Saba from Locked On Canadiens. For Brandon Pillar, I'm Ross Levitan. Stick with us. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. All right, you're listening to the crossover edition of our Atlantic Division preview. You can go to our YouTube page, Locked On Senators. You can also go over to Locked On Canadiens. Make sure you're subscribed there for daily coverage each and every weekday all season long. And Laura, we're going to have to get you back on when it's Sens and Habs. I'm looking at the schedule right now, and like I said, it stinks not having this right away. The first meeting is December 14th.
Crazy.
December 14th in Montreal, but don't worry. We'll turn up the heat on some of the coldest days of the year. A back-to-back. First in Montreal, then in Ottawa, January 28th, and then
Nice.
January 31st, and then February 25th in Ottawa will complete the 4-game series. So no spring games when sometimes playoff marches can be on, but I don't think that's going to matter this season in particular. But what Montreal Canadiens player, besides the top 2, because everyone knows the excitement around Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield, but who are you most excited to see develop this season in Montreal?
Like development? I'm
Yes.
really hoping to see Caden Gooley make the team.
Yeah.
It
Nice.
would make sense to send him to Laval and have him play that number 1 defenseman or number 2 defenseman minutes. It makes the most sense. But he's one of the prospects that I'm most excited about. Before the 2022 draft class, he was the top next prospect in my mind. He was the best they'd had now that Caulfield had graduated to the NHL level. So I'm really excited about him. I don't necessarily think that he's going to make the team right away. And I wonder if they do some sort of a hybrid, because I think it'd be very beneficial to him if there's a playoff push or a playoff run in Laval to put him there. Like, I'd rather they do that than keep him in Montreal artificially when we know the Montreal team is not going anywhere. But he's the guy that I'm the most excited to see. Like, I think the Canadiens really need, they really need their defensive future to shake up. We want to see what it's going to look like. And right now it's just a big question mark. There's guys I'm excited about, Lane Hutson being one of them.
Yep.
I personally, in my mind, want to see a pairing with Caden Gooley and Lane Hutson. It'd just be really funny. But also, I think one of the things Caden Gooley does that's underrated by us too is his offensive skill. When he was first drafted, we thought, just another defenseman, like a big dude who's going to shut down, but he generates offense. He might not, be a pure goal scorer in any sense of the word, but he's smart offensively. the mistakes that he makes that I see are mistakes of inexperience. They're not mistakes of lack of talent. Sometimes like a person can have hands, but like not be able to make decisions at all on the ice. Like that's not what I worry about with him. So I'm excited to see him take the next step. And I think for me, I want to see if Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield can continue their development. I mean, they are the two teams, they are the two players that people are watching the most right now. And I think last year we kind of got a little bit nervous with Cole Caulfield's first half of the season. And for me, I just want to see a little bit more consistency in terms of improvement, and not a whole lot, a little bit. Like I think they're the two players that are the most involved in most of the plays and everything like that. So I just want to see that in terms of my expectations. I don't necessarily have somebody that's a sure bet to take the jump, but I will say this. I know Sens fans aren't going to like this, but Arber Xhekaj, I think, is going to be an NHLer. When I had him pegged for a career AHLer, I had him also mistakenly pegged as a goon, as a pure goon, right? Like just like some guy who does gratuitous violence, but he can
You should
actually
be a
play.
scout. Actually, that's a good report.
I think he's going to surprise a lot of people. I think people who had been watching him closely when he was playing on the Bulldogs would always argue with us. So we were like, he's too violent. They would always argue with us. But you see the way that he plays, and I think if he's able to stick to a defensive game, like he's going to be really good. And I think he's going to be in the NHL. Which, if you'd asked me this 6 weeks ago, I would have been like, "Are you crazy?"
Yeah, I mean, he came on in the playoffs. You look at it in 3 years straight, actually, he got traded midseason. But funny enough, it's like in 2019, 2020, it's 17 points. Then at the start of this year, it's 17 points with Kitchener, and then 17 points with Hamilton. But then he had 16 points in the playoffs. So
Wow.
this guy's consistent, if nothing else, for sure.
I don't know. He's a lot more talented than we've all given him credit for. And the Canadians got him for free, right? Like he was undrafted. And I know, and this is something that like I know it's caused a lot of problems on the internet. Like he gets made fun of because he was playing at Costco. I'm like, he was gainfully employed. That is an honorable thing to do. Like he became a pro hockey player, but like, in the absence of that, he had a job.
Oh yeah.
So
No, we don't chirp him for that. I just think he should hit guys when they have the puck and not 5 seconds after they dump it off. That's my only issue with him.
We're gonna be fighting about this all year.
I hope so. Like I said, the K train's just marinating one more season in North Dakota, and then we'll have our own tank on the back end because he's a big kid, man. What is he? 6'4", 240. Him and Slafkovsky are both like the Twin Towers out there.
Yeah, he's a big guy. He's an interesting character too, like people just talk about, just that aspect of him, that violent streak. I think he talks about himself. He doesn't want to be known for that. So like I do think that there's a little bit of work that the coaching staff have to do with him on that front. And people, in the Canadiens fandom, they do get upset when I say things like that. But I really do think that he needs to rein in those impulses and really just play a defensive game, because I do think that aspect of his game is underrated. Again, I'm not saying this to rile up Senators fans. I really am not. I'm saying this because I purely believe it, because I've been wrong about that, and I am eating crow on the Sens podcast right now.
Oh, it's all good. No, we understand. Like I said, if he was with Senator, I'd probably love him. But
Yes.
And like Angus Crookshank's like one of our favorite guys, and he was quick to say last year like that was just a tough position he put himself in. It was more so the Ostapchuk hit and the Victor Lodin hit the Lodin where it was like after the whistle and it wasn't there. Anyways, so we'll chalk it up. I'm keeping my eye on Xhekaj though. I'm gonna keep my eye on him, and we'll see. But Pilsy, who's the guy on the Sens that you expect to have a breakout year?
The guy that I'm really looking at is Drake Batherson. He missed a lot of time due to injury last season. He was the Sens named All-Star before he got injured, and he was a guy that basically played at a point-per-game clip. Like he finished with 44 points in 46 games, and like Ross mentioned earlier in the episode, DJ Smith is going to keep him on that top power play unit where they've been clicking. He's going to stay on that line with Josh Norris and Brady Tkachuk. I only see that line getting better. And if Drake can stay healthy, I think he's someone that a lot of the rest of the NHL is going to be so focused on DeBrincat, Giroux, Norris, Stützle, Brady, where he's someone that maybe may fly under the radar. So for fantasy drafts, he's a sleeper. And for fans of other teams, when Ottawa comes to town, keep an eye on Drake.
Absolutely. And when we look at BetOnline, I already gave you some player props, but when it comes to point totals for the season for teams, sometimes they're close and sometimes they're not. Last year, they opened the Ottawa Senators at 73.5 points. They finished with 73. They opened with Montreal at 89.5, and they finished with 55.
Ooh, wow.
Now, the Habs are opening at 71.5 points. Laura, are you confident that they can hit the over on that?
Yes, not significantly over, but I am expecting that Martin St. Louis is going to get enough overtime losses, I mean, you can tell how old I am, and some wins, because I think, one of the things is that we talk about, we want a low finish for the Canadiens.
Yep.
We want a high draft pick. But are you going to tell Martin St. Louis to go out there and lose games?
No.
Right? And I think, the Canadiens defense is, I don't even think it's a question mark. I think it's just like a gap, like just a giant hole.
It's a dot.
It's a dot.
Like
It's
to
to
be
be continued.
Yeah.
And the goaltending it's dependent on both the health of both goalies, Montembeault and Jake Allen, because I think they're competent. I'm not going to say they're Carey Price level. We're not going to get that kind of goaltending out of them, but they're competent. And Jake Allen, when he's healthy, can pull out those games that are really frustrating for the opponents. He's
owned Ottawa a couple times.
Yeah, so I do think that with they're going to get basically competent goaltending if both goalies can be healthy and even be sort of in the positive end of that. I just think that their forwards, a lot of the scoring is going to be carried by Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki. They do have an embarrassment of riches at forward right now. In fact, they're trying to trade a bunch of those guys because there's just too many of them at this point. So I do think that they're going to be able to pull out enough points to get the over, but not significantly over. I'm thinking 75, 78, something like that. I don't think they're going to go much higher than that. They're definitely going to be last in the division. I don't know if we're doing division rankings, but I don't think the Canadiens are going to be anywhere above. This is the hardest division in the NHL.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
and there are no other teams that are this bad in the division.
No, even Buffalo is getting their influx of young talent right now as well. Detroit, Ottawa, there's been a lot of talk about them kind of going head to head. And yeah, no doubt. I mean, when I said Jake Allen did well against Ottawa, it brought me back to my least favorite moment of last season. Pilsy, when the Hamburglar turned on us. When the Hamburglar turned on us, that was the saddest shit I've ever seen. Ever.
That was not sad. That was awesome.
That was sad, man.
That was amazing.
He's our Cinderella story.
Yeah.
And
then he just grabbed the shoe and hit me over the head with that. Was it a shutout? If not, it was one goal against.
I want to say it was a shutout.
I want to say it was a shutout too. I preferred it when he was shutting out teams in California and making that run to the playoffs on the last day of the season. Although it was the Montreal Canadiens that made the clock strike midnight on the Hamburglar run as well, pulling him after the first two games of that 6-game series back in 2015. All right, Pilsy. So the Ottawa Senators are opening at 86.5. Where are you at with that?
Again, I'll follow Laura's optimism and I'll say over. It's a massive jump for the Ottawa Senators to make, but they made massive jumps in the offseason. And yes, the defense is still a question mark, but I really think this is a team that's going to outscore a lot of their problems. And then having two veteran goalies to give your team a chance to win every single night is such a massive boost. And a lot of this hinges on young players, and a lot of these young players are only going to get better. Like I mentioned, I really think we're going to see improved seasons from Brady Tkachuk, who led the team in scoring, had 30 goals. We're going to see hopefully a healthy Josh Norris, who had 35 goals in 66 games last year, and Tim Stützle, after signing the richest contract in Ottawa Senators franchise history, he's going to be poised to have a big season with new line mates in Claude Giroux and Alex DeBrincat. So I think there's a lot of things trending upward for the Sens, and this year's different. The players are sick of losing. Brady Tkachuk, his entire career has been
in his
leading.
5th year.
Yeah, he's been leading a team to losing seasons. He's sick of that. So I think there's a lot of motivation. Everything is put in place for this team to succeed. I think they're going to be a team that is battling for that final wild card spot in the East, because the East is just so strong. It's very tough to make it. So that's where I see the Sens kind of slotting in here as we look at the season ending here.
Well, this was an awesome season preview. Laura Saba, you can find her on Locked On Canadiens on Twitter, LO_Canadiens. Pilsy, should we get her take on the Leaf pile before we go? We've been doing this to each
It is
Atlantic.
tradition.
This
The
is
leaf
tradition.
pile?
We've got this. Yeah, the Leaf pile right outside the arena. You have to pick your favorite Leafs fan. This is right after the Tampa Bay Lightning Game 7 win.
We've had all different answers too, Ross. I don't think we've had too many repeat answers, so I'm interested to see your favorite, Laura.
Oh my God. All right, hold on.
There's so many good ones. For
There's
those listening
so
on audio,
many
you
good
gotta
ones.
go over to the YouTube channel, subscribe, and then just scrub towards the end. It is
Ross,
potentially
everyone has seen us bring this up. Even the audio listeners know the Leaf pile pick.
All right. I
You got him?
think I've
Or her?
got one. Yes. So there is a woman sort of towards the center, a little bit above the middle.
Yeah.
And it looks like she's resting her head on this guy's
Yeah,
shoulder.
I see it.
yes.
I
That's
see
a
it.
first. We haven't had this one called out yet.
Yeah.
But to me, it looks like somebody who's saying, "Not again." Like
Yeah.
it's not surprise. It's like it's resignation. It doesn't,
Yeah.
it doesn't look at all shocked.
Yeah,
A lot of the
she's
people
done.
look shocked.
She's
Yeah.
tired.
Yeah,
So-
the boyfriend, if that is the relationship there, he looks like he's told his girl like this year's different, and then it
Yeah.
wasn't different.
Deer in headlights a little bit.
Yeah,
But yeah,
it was the
she's
same.
just like, not again.
How about also, I think it was Adam Denker, who obviously he had the joy of being on the right side of this win as well with Locked On Lightning, but he pointed out the woman under the scoreboard with she's holding her hat. That's an all-time sad, angry face right there. You can see she's like right under the guy in the white jersey there. She's holding her blue Leafs hat. She is not having a good night. She is in one following a 4-3 overtime loss in Game 7.
Does look like
This
she's
is a
gonna
Mona
go-
Lisa. Isn't this a Mona Lisa right here? It's like the Last Supper. This
I
might be our
feel-
most pulled up photo.
This is really, really funny because I didn't know that this was a thing.
Oh, yeah.
Big
I
time.
just assumed you were going to ask about the Leafs, and I was getting ready, but this is even more fun than that.
No, Pilsy is the one who titled Maple Leaf Square the Leaf Pile, because they all just go and then they get swept away after the first round. But no, this has been great, Laura. Any final thoughts or questions for us before we wrap up?
I think we're good. We'll probably encounter each other in November. That
Yes.
is when it is. Gives us a
December
little bit-
14th.
December
even.
14th.
I
Give
first
us-
said November. December 14th.
You get a break from us, Laura.
Yeah, exactly. Make good use of it.
I hope the Habs do, because I hope that the conversation that we're having kind of illuminates at that point like where these teams are going. Like, is Ottawa indeed taking those strides forward that their offseason moves have dictated they would? And is Montreal like on a slow and steady improvement? Like, I don't want to see any of that.
Yeah. Well, hey, these questions will all either be answered or be well on their way to by then. We'll be sure to have a crossover edition available for the great listener. By then, I'm sure your listeners are like, hell no, get these guys out of here. And our listeners are like, no, more Habs. It's great. But that's what makes the rivalry, because then we'll then sit here all the way through it. And we always say we laugh whenever Wheeler or Elite Prospects, they put out their list. We say we get mad at lists. Well, there's also getting mad at your rivals, which is always fun as long as we all keep it nice and respectful at the same time. Laura, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thanks so much for doing it.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
My pleasure. Pilsy, any final thoughts, brother?
I'm just so excited. I had the two tales of the Ottawa Senators Habs rivalry last year, Laura. I went all the way to Montreal. It was my first time there. I was so excited. The Senators lost 5-1. It was not fun.
Sorry.
It was not great for me. Yes. But the other side of that story is Ross and I got to have an incredible day in Ottawa where the Sens beat up on the Habs in what, 6-4?
I think?
Yeah. So that was
we went to
fun
get a
game.
beer. We missed 3 goals though.
Yeah. It
That
all
was when
happened
you had the
quick.
gathering, right? Like,
Yes,
Yeah,
that was our meet and
exactly.
greet day. So it
That was
a
the
lot of fun.
Gallagher 2.0. He took a penalty on Timmy and the DJ played In Your Head. That was just a great night. It was a ton of fun. No, and hey, more moments come in the rivalry. The most important stat, though, 1-1 in playoff series right now. Ottawa got the better of Montreal in 2013. Montreal did the same in 2015. And we hope that one day, sooner rather than later, these two teams will meet again because the drama is unparalleled across the National Hockey League. For today, though, we say goodbye. You can follow Laura, as I said, on Twitter, LO_Canadiens. Download, subscribe wherever you get their podcasts. Same as Sens Central on Twitter. For Laura Saba and Brandon Pillar, I'm Ross Levitan. This has been another crossover edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. It's your team every day.